Hey Kidtown friends, welcome back to Mrs. Smith's Kidtown Tales. And today I'm going to read our last book for the week. It's called Jack's Garden, and I'm sure you can guess why I'm doing Jack's Garden, because G is one of our letters for this week. And when I get up in the morning, I've been trying to think of 3 things that I'm thankful for, because I know there's a lot that we're missing right now, but what I'm thankful for is the fact that we still get to go outside and we can do gardening things. We can work in our gardens. We can play in the backyard. So I thought this would be a good one for us for this week, since it is starting to get nice out. So this is called Jack's Garden. Ooh, look at that! Wow, he's got a big one. With a big fence around it. This is the garden that Jack planted. Oh, and he's got all his different tools around here, like a hose and a rake and a trowel, watering can. This is the soil that made up the garden that Jack planted. So that's one thing you need. You need soil. And look at all these different animals that you can find in the soil, like, oh, cicadas. You know those things that are really noisy in the summertime? They are... during the other parts of the year, they're buried and they're kind of hibernating. So cicadas are in the ground. Let's see, slug eggs, fly, I think it's pupa, P-U-P-A, slugs, earthworms. Those are things that live in the soil. Oh, and then even some animals like a mole, a star-nosed mole. These are the seeds that fell on the soil that made up the garden that Jack planted. So now look at all these different things he has. Poppy seeds, hollyhock seeds, sunflower seeds, lupine seeds. So those, I think, are all, those are all flowers. But you can plant vegetable seeds as well, too. This is the rain that wet the seeds that fell on the soil that made up the garden that Jack planted. So that's the other thing you really need. You need water. So water and soil. So there's something else that we need. Hopefully they talk about it. These are the seedlings that sprouted with the rain that wet the seeds that fell on the soil that made up the garden that Jack planted. So look at all those. Oh my goodness. And there's a robin. So these are the tiny little seedlings that come up. So these are like the baby plants. These are the plants that grew from the seedlings that sprouted with the rain that wet the seeds that fell on the soil that made up the garden that Jack planted. Whoa, look at these. So here's what so you'll notice too that all the different leaves they're all different. So that's a bee balm, hollyhock, hawkweed. Ooh, and then sometimes you might find a garter snake, which is not poisonous at all. What else? Firefly, some spiders. Right. These are the buds that formed on the plants that grew from the seedlings that sprouted with the rain that wet the seeds that fell on the soil that made up the garden that Jack planted. You know what they didn't talk about? What's the third thing that we need to grow things? That's right, the sun. Good job. So buds. So yeah, I'm sure on your daily walks, if you look up at the trees, you'll notice that there's little buds on the trees, and also there's things coming up out of the ground as well too. So those are buds. These are the flowers that blossomed from the buds that formed on the plants that grew from the seedlings that sprouted with the rain that wet the seeds that fell on the soil that made up the garden that Jack planted. Oh, so those little buds turned into flowers. And we learned in the fall that on an apple tree, remember those little pink flowers formed, and then those pink flowers grew into apples, which was cool too. These are the insects that sipped nectar from the flowers that blossomed from the buds that formed on the plants that grew from the seedlings that sprouted with the rain that wet the seeds that fell on the soil that made up the garden that Jack planted. Yeah, we need insects. They're very important to spreading and making more flowers. These are the birds that chase the insects, that sip the nectar from the flowers, that blossomed from the buds, that formed on the plants, that grew from the seedlings, that sprouted with the rain, that wet the seeds, that fell on the soil, that made up the garden, that Jack planted. Oh, and I bet you're seeing a lot of birds out there. We've seen a lot of cardinals, and we have a few eagles here that we've been watching, and hawks. And this is the garden that Jack planted. Look at that. Amazing. So, I thought to be a little different, because I'm sure you're planting things outside, and I know that we've done that a lot at Tree Town. I am going to give you a question, and with that question, I want you to do an experiment. So my question to you is, these things have already grown from the ground, right? And we buy them at the grocery store. And right now, we can't go to the grocery store very often, so we kind of have to use the things that we have in our refrigerator. So I saw this really cool experiment online where the question is, what will happen if you use food scraps and you put them in water? Are they going to do nothing, or will something grow? Because remember, these are, they're plants, right? And they have roots and things. So, and one of the things you need to have things grow is water. And do we always need soil to grow, right? That's going to be our question. So I'm going to show you. So just take, and remember, they're food scraps. So after your family has prepared maybe a salad or some sort of side for their meal, you can use some of the scraps that are, so you don't have to go to the grocery store. This is stuff that you have in your refrigerator. So I have this stuff, it's called bok choy, and it's kind of like a Asian lettuce. And I'm going to use it tonight for a salad. But what I'm going to do is, you don't usually use this bottom part. I would normally throw this away. But I'm going to see what happens if I put it in a little bit of water. So watch this. So I'm going to place this down in here. Whoop. And look at it, it's floating, which is kind of cool. I wonder if it'll end up floating to the bottom. So I'm going to leave that in there for a few days and watch it and see what happens. Does it do nothing, or will something grow from it? We'll see. Here's another thing you can use. So here's a carrot, and I just cut off the top. And again, normally I would throw this away. I don't have a shallow enough dish to use here, but you could also just place this in water, and you don't want to cover it, but just maybe water up to the top of the orange part and see what happens. So that's something else you can use. And then here is cilantro, which I love to use in guacamole. And people use it in other things as well too. But I'm just going to take a few pieces. So this is an herb. So you could try basil. You could try rosemary, a sprig of rosemary if you have that. And then I'm just going to place it in here and put some water in it. And I am going to leave it by a sunny window. And then I'm going to see what happens. So I have a link to this kind of experiment and what other vegetables you can use. I have sent a link to your parents, or I'm going to, once I'm done with all these videos, I'm going to attach those too. So, and you can let me know what happens. You could send me a video, or you could text me a picture, but I'd love to see what your results are, what you observed. Okay. All right. So happy experimenting, and I will chat with you soon. Bye, Kid Town friends.